Welcome to the Teachers Talkin' podcast, hosted by Dustin and Ghazali Abdul Wahab. In this podcast, we discuss all things education and teaching, from innovative teaching methods to challenges to strategies and much, much more. In this discussion or roundtable-based podcast, we bring in educators from all around the world to talk about a variety of education topics so that we can support as many teachers as possible. We want this to be a place of inspiration, personal and professional development, and simply a place where we can elevate education together. Welcome to Teachers Talkin'. Everybody, this is Teachers Talkin'. I am Dustin here with Ghazali, and today it's the two of us, but we are going to tackle a topic that we have both been hearing nonstop. I think that's something everybody has been hearing nonstop for not even just recently, probably over the last few years, and that is teacher retention and why teachers stay, but also why they choose to leave. So this episode is titled Why Teachers Stay and Why They Leave. And our guiding question is what keeps teachers in the classroom, and how do we make teaching sustainable without lowering expectations for students or for educators? So let's jump in, Ghazali. When you hear the words teacher retention, what do you think people misunderstand most about why teachers leave or why they stay? And why do you think that's even something we should be talking about right now?
Okay, really, that's at the crux of the matter. I think the biggest misunderstanding is that people assume teachers leave mainly because of money, when often that's not the case. Most of the time, I think it's a feeling of being powerless. Don't get me wrong, okay? Compensation matters a lot these days. But what really drives teachers out is the erosion of their professional autonomy, I think, and the crushing weight of being unable to do what they know works. So told to follow scripts when they know their students need something different. They're buried in documentation, requirements, while meaningful planning time disappears. And they watch class sizes balloon and support services shrink, then get blamed when students struggle. So people also miss that teachers rarely leave because they stop caring. They leave because they care so much that watching themselves become less effective is simply unbearable. So I think that's a crucial distinction. What do you think?
I think all of what you said. I think that, people don't get into the teaching profession to make a lot of money. And so, yeah, would it be nice for teachers to make more money? Absolutely. And it's hard to even talk about teacher pay because it's so different. In the United States, it's wildly different, not even just from state to state, but even from like school district to school district. It could be wildly, wildly different. But what I do know is that in most teachers that I know don't make enough money for cost of living. And that is a problem. But most people go into education already knowing that that's the case. And so to me, yeah, that's one of the things that people want to say is driving teachers out. And it's not that it's not a factor. It's just not the biggest contributing factor from my vantage point. And it really seems to be a lot more about teachers not having the kind of, I'm going to use the word control. I don't know if it's the right word, but I think it's teachers that are starting to lose the sense of control that they once had that they don't have. I think teachers feel less empowered, and I don't feel that teachers feel supported the way that they need to be supported to do what they need to do in the classroom to teach students. So to me, there's a lot of factors that go into this issue of teacher retention. And some of those factors are, a lot of those factors are things that are outside of teachers' control. And I think that's where a lot of the problem starts to come in. So, I mean, I'm guessing that you, just very much like me then, have seen teachers kind of coming and going. You're seeing the ones who are staying and how they're feeling, either what's driving them or what's leading them to sort of like complain on a regular basis. Have you noticed what the warning signs look like when a teacher is starting to head towards feeling burned out in the profession, or starting to feel like maybe they want to leave and do something different?
Okay, two things I notice. First, I guess, is this the desire to work, the need to care wanes. So you have this phenomena called quiet quitting. So teachers start doing work just to meet the bare minimum expectations. And when that happens, you know that there's going to be an impact on the students. And when they see that happen to their classroom, sometimes it just breaks their hearts, and they can't take it anymore and they'll just leave. Yeah, because it's something that if you are in the profession for the good of your students and you see that you are no longer effective, this is one profession where you just sometimes tell yourself it's time to get out. Let somebody else do the job who can do it better. So there's this guilt, this feeling of guilt that takes over. That's one of the patterns or signs that I see. Second is, of course, just simply being burnt out and stressed out, and you have this breakdown mentally. Because you just do not know what to do. You feel like you're in a place that you can't get out of, and you just decide, enough is enough, and you leave for your own good. The first one, you leave for the students' good. This one, you're leaving because it's for your own mental sake. Yeah. Otherwise, you'll just break down, and you can't function anymore. So those are the two things that I see happening.
Yeah.
How about you?
Yeah, I mean, I see something very similar, and I'll talk about even my own experience. Like, I absolutely was in a place of leaving the profession. Like, I thought about it. I looked for other jobs, and I just didn't know. Like, I was losing my passion. There was a lot that was going on. I was in a not the best situation
Mm.
at school, where
Yeah.
things were going really well, and there was a change in leadership, and things started to become a lot more of a like toxic environment, and that I was really starting to weigh on me. And so I know I started looking for roles outside of education, and quite frankly, I was bored with everything that I was looking at. I was just like, I don't like any of these things. Like, none of this feels like it suits me and what I want. And that was actually when I transitioned out of leadership and back to the classroom. And when I went back to the classroom, I experienced additional trauma in a new environment that was also not the best environment. And it took for some like different events to happen before I realized that that's what was going on with me. It wasn't that I was losing my passion, it was that I was burning out. And I
Yeah.
think it happened over a long period of time, where it
Yeah.
started early in my career, where I was yes to everything, no matter what it was. I wanted to give my all and do whatever I could to help students and to help my community, because that's why we get into being educators in the first place. But as I looked back, I realized that the more I said yes to things, the less that people were getting of me, the less that people were getting my best in all areas, because you can't
Yeah.
operate at your best when you're doing a bunch of things. I realized that I was working late into the night, that I was working on weekends, that I was answering emails whenever they popped through. I was just essentially living and breathing school and education. And that then, as time went on, led to not wanting to go out and do things, not sleeping well, high levels of stress, days where I didn't want to go to work, days where I came home feeling stressed out and anxious, which then spiraled into my night, loss of appetite, all sorts of different conditions kind of
Yeah.
came unnaturally, or yes, they are natural, because
Yeah.
of the stress that was, and it was just compounding over time. And honestly, I didn't know that it was happening to me. So
Yeah. That happens. Yeah. And I think that, I mean, for me, I felt the same. Maybe I didn't have lots of appetite. I ate more
mm,
and gained more weight. Yeah, I guess it's more of those comfort. comfort eating, they call it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
So,
mean, even though I had loss of appetite, I would snack on really sugary things. Like I
yeah,
became more of a snacker. Yeah, exactly that. Which just like
yep,
I
yep,
said, leads to all sorts of other problems. So
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Then my health declined. My
Mm-hmm.
blood pressure went up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So all these things are factors. And sometimes there are also signs that tell you that you got to slow down. You got to take look at your condition, your context, and see whether is it really worth it to, for you to risk your health over this. Yeah. So, Dustin, in your experience, what are the biggest push factors that drive teachers out, especially the ones people outside education underestimate?
I think it's exactly what we're talking about, right? Like the things that push people out is the administrators who are evaluating teachers for observations rather than coaching teachers. I think it is administrations who are not supporting teachers in the classroom with student behavior and class management. I think it's teachers not getting support for their own growth and development. In most schools, you go to a quote unquote professional development every week, which is really just a meeting. So I think like making sure that we're naming meetings as meetings and professional development opportunities as professional development opportunities. I think even when we are talking about professional development, people are not always getting the type of PD that they need. Oftentimes, I know again, looking to my own experiences, I was being placed in professional development settings that were talking about things that I was very proficient in doing and that I simply didn't need. They weren't deepening my understanding. They weren't teaching me something new. They weren't helping me, make changes in my classroom. And I think that those are, and then when you talk about people who deal with unruly parents or unruly administrations or don't have work best friends or school that has not facilitated a positive learning environment and culture. And then when you go through all those things, you get to the low pay and the fact that I'm like working multiple jobs to make ends meet, or I'm barely making it by, or whatever it might be. I think that then comes in at the bottom where like all these other factors are compounding. And then you say, man, I'm not even making money that's worth it to deal with all of these problems. So there's so many things that are pushing people out. And I think that those things are happening in different waves and in different ways in different places. Like it's like all
Yeah,
of those things and probably more. And in
yeah,
different places, different factors are meeting together to make those impacts on people. What are you seeing? What do you
yeah.
think?
Yeah, I think that's it. One thing I see definitely also a major shift is I think the way that the profession is being perceived. Um, Previously, I think when I was a student, you look at teachers with respect. It's a respectful profession. In fact, people who were teachers go on to become, like politicians, because there's that element of trust. When you're a teacher, it comes with trust. People trust you. But these days, sometimes, you feel like you have become more of the problem rather than the solution. You have parents who question your decision, perhaps. You are being questioned when the results are not there, when students don't produce the results. You're asked like, well, what have you done in the classroom? Are you being effective? When actually you have poured your heart and soul, because if you're really a good teacher, you wouldn't want to see your students fail. And so when they do, you bear the burden of it, right? So there's that depth of professional respect in the sense that really, really is heartbreaking and can be demoralizing as well. Then to add to that, you have the crisis, the time poverty crisis. People think teachers' life are great. It's great. You have your holidays, your 1 month, 2 month holidays at the end of the year, or I think what you call your summer breaks. So
Mm-hmm.
they have plenty of time. But actually, what they don't see is during the school year itself, teachers are time starved in the ways most professions aren't.
Mm-hmm.
Planning periods get eaten by meetings, writing emails to parents, writing reports, lunch break don't exist. Sometimes your timetable is so packed, you can't even have time to go to the toilet. You got to
Mm-hmm.
hold it in.
Yep.
You got the next class coming up. Then, and what people don't see is this is the teacher marking, grading till midnight to so that they can give the students the feedback as soon as possible the next day.
Mm-hmm.
These are things that nobody sees, you know. So it's that thankless part of the job that
It makes me think
it's
about,
taking away. Yeah.
these, like, for people who work in an office, right? In the business world. It's like, can you imagine if you had to prepare to go into work every day and lead 7 or 8 different meetings over the course of that day in your 8-hour day, and you needed to make sure that in each of those meetings you were meeting the individual needs of each of the people that you were working with in those meetings, and they were different people in each of those meetings, and you had about 30 to 35 people in each meeting, and half of those meetings are about something different than the other half of the meetings. Right? And you got to keep people engaged because you have some level of output. If somebody in the business world had to do that, maybe they would understand what teachers actually go through. The amount of time that you have to spend to make sure that you are meeting the needs of all of the kids, that you are able to develop a sense of community and culture across every classroom that you teach. And that's going to lead to having to spend time outside of work to do the things that you need to do to keep things rolling. I guarantee that if you had teachers log their hours, they're actually working more hours, or at least equal hours to anyone else who's working a normal 40-day week, who can come in and clock in and leave when their day is over and leave all work at work and fully separate. And there's ways for teachers to do that. Like, let me be very clear, like in some of my coaching, like that's one of the goals that I have, is to help teachers find ways of doing less outside of the classroom and keeping work at work and home at home. I think that's a really important piece about creating a
Yeah,
work-life balance. So
agreed.
there are pieces
Yeah,
there are things that are attainable. Like, I don't want this to be a doom and gloom episode by any means, right? But you're right when you say that, like, people who are not in this profession don't understand this profession, and that the amount of time that we put in equals the amount of time, it leads to the amount of time that we have off. And even in
yeah,
those times that we have off, more times than not, people are not unplugging and just doing nothing for all of the time that they have off. They might do that for some of that time, but really good teachers are reflecting during that time. They're planning during that
yeah,
time. They're grading during
yeah,
that time. They're retooling during that time,
yeah,
because you don't have the time to do that in your Monday through Friday. So it has to happen somewhere else. So yeah, I mean, it's just, there's so much that goes into this, and people who don't teach, honestly, more times than not, simply don't understand. And I think
yep,
that's part of the problem, is that then they don't seek to understand. So when you say that this profession is one that used to be respected, I mean, in the United States, this is not really a profession that's respected any longer. It really isn't. It is in some places. But the overwhelming big conversation is that it's not, and that frustrates teachers everywhere.
yeah. Because we all know it should be, shouldn't it?
I mean, it should.
Yeah.
So what can I guess let's flip and talk about what can people do to make this a profession that is sustainable, that it's somewhere where you want to be, where you feel good about being a teacher instead of feeling stressed out and anxious all the time. What are some things from your perspective that people can do differently to try to create that balance and create that sustainability?
Okay, definitely there are a lot of things that can be done. From my perspective, one of the most important things is to show trust and give teachers autonomy to do the work that they are trained to do. So I think when you hear the school leader say that, "Oh, I trust your judgment," that means a lot to a teacher,
Mm-hmm.
because it means that you're not confined to just follow the curriculum or the syllabus and you are allowed to be creative in the way that you teach. Yeah, so for the best of your students, because you know your students best, you see them in the classroom every day, right? So that's one thing. Second thing, I think and this is for practically every profession, I guess, is this collegial relationship.
Hmm.
If you can build collegial relationship, friendly co-workers, someone that the teachers who can they can collaborate authentically with, and you create this culture of collaboration where teachers come together, then they can problem solve together. And when someone's struggling, they can see and they want to help each other. And most importantly, they celebrate each other's successes. That definitely creates an environment where teachers will want to stay, because it's very hard to find a workplace like that in any profession, right? So once you find it, you've got to stay, because that's like heaven. That's the place that you should be, where you can be at your best. And I think the third thing, the most one of also very important, is the evidence of impact. You got to see that what you do matters. So if you can produce the impact and you see the result on the students, you will stay for the students, because that's why you enter the profession in the first place. Because you've always wanted the best for your students, and you see that the students are doing well, they're graduating, they're going to the institutions of their choices, and they have bright futures. That's why you entered teaching, I would think.
Hmm.
So, and you feel that you've made a difference, then of course you want to stay. I guess other things that matter will be things like creative challenge, intellectual and creative challenges, even the students themselves. Even in a school, if you have very good discipline and the students are there motivated and want to learn, it really makes your job much easier, right? So these are the things I think that matter.
Yeah. I work with a lot of teachers and tell them that one of the things that we need to focus on is what is within our locus of control and what is outside of our locus of control. Because a lot of the things that I think are driving teachers away are the things that are outside of teacher control. And while it's true that there are schools and administrations that don't help to hold students accountable, that don't support teachers, that simply don't do all the right things, and likely they're also like a very highly traditional school, and that's all true. And you can still find peace and sustainability and balance even in that type of a situation when you understand the limitations that you have and you work within those limitations. You talked a little bit earlier about quiet quitting. I think I think there's not really quiet quitting in education. I do think that there's people who will start to do the bare minimum, but also like isn't that what happens in most professions? Isn't that what most people do? Is most people don't do the like going above and beyond. And I think that when teachers start to do simply the things that are asked of them, some of the above and beyond is going to come because you sort of naturally do what you need to do specifically for your students. What I'm talking about doing bare minimum for is everything else, all of the other expectations that you have. So, for example, I when I was burning out, one of the first things I did was I removed anything work related from my phone. Part of my problem was getting emails on my phone or text messages from work, things like that. So, like, if work people had my number, I would mute them, or if I was in a school group, I would mute it for the weekend. I would mute it after 5 p.m. I took email off of my phone so that I could not get it and respond to it immediately. I stopped working from home more times than not. So as I started going into my weeks, I would say, look, this week I'm willing to stay after school, on Tuesday and Thursday. And I'm going to stay. The day ends at 3. I'm going to stay until 5:30. I'm going to use those extra times to really buckle in and get some things done. And when I walk out of the door, that's it. Work is at work. and now it's time for me to be at home. And I tried to do that Monday through Thursday at least, where when I left the school building, that was it. That was my day. I wasn't doing any more schoolwork. I wasn't answering emails. I wasn't answering phone calls. I wasn't grading papers. I was really had to set boundaries for myself. And if that meant I needed to come in early one day to make copies or to do grades, or stay late one day to do some things, or 2 days, then I would do that. I would not do that for 4 or 5 days. 1 or 2 days at most, I would spend doing some extra time. And then if it meant I needed to do something on the weekend to be prepared for the next week, I would. But I would not spend my whole weekend doing it. I started limiting and setting boundaries for myself. So I would go into a Saturday and say, all right, I need to get these things done, but I'm only willing to work between 8 a.m. and noon. If I start before 8 a.m., great, but I will not end after noon. And I'll give myself those 4 hours, and what I can knock out in those 4 hours is great. And what I don't is left for next week. Hard stop. Because you don't owe anybody anything. Like, yes, you're a servant person, right? Like, that's why you're an educator. You're there to serve a community.
Yeah.
But
A public servant.
But at the same time, you have to draw lines at like where you're going to do that. I think I started to say no to things. When I couldn't take something on, I started to be like, no, I can't do that. If my time was going to be taken at school, I started to say things like, I actually had that time planned for something else. Happy to help you, but when am I getting my time back? If somebody wanted to have a last minute meeting, I started to learn to be like, nope, I can't do that. Happy to schedule a time with you that's not today. Or if this is pressing, I need to make sure that you're giving me this 30 minutes back somewhere else if you're taking my time today. Like, I just learned to simply stand up for myself. I started telling parents and students that I wouldn't respond to emails after a certain time of day, that I wasn't even checking my email after a certain time of day, that I would respond within 48 business hours. And then I would stick to that. So it was really, really, really about starting to set really hard boundaries for myself, establishing clear work hours, using my planning time like super purposefully, because I live alone. So my planning time for me has always been like, that's when I like to socialize. But if I have my planning period and I close my door and I lock it and I don't let students in, and I don't text my friends, and I don't get on social media, and I don't let teachers in, and I use that 30 minutes, 45 minutes, hour, or whatever it might be to like lock in and do some things, I found that I started to be more productive. When I stopped going to the teacher lounge, which is a pretty traditionally toxic environment. It's like the place where people like to go to dump. And I stopped going there. I stopped going there to socialize. I stopped going there to complain. I stopped going there to like eat. I started eating in my own room and doing working lunches, just simply to save me the time somewhere else. So really trying to use the time that I was at school with a lot of purpose. And there's a lot of other things I could tell you that I have done to create more balance and sustainability. And, you know, to people who are listening, this is why I created the Balanced Educator Workbook, which is something that I actually give away for free on my website. And it's all about like being able to self-assess and see where you are as an educator. And then it has a ton of strategies to help you create that sustainability and balance for yourself. And I did that because I was burning out and I needed to recognize what all was going wrong with me and what do I need to do about it. And as I made changes to create a better, more balanced and sustainable life as an educator, I started keeping track of the things that I was doing so that I could share those tasks, those abilities with other people.
Nice. I'm glad you did that. But Dustin, a lot of retention right now, right, is also tied to student behavior, not just the school culture or your colleagues, right? The students themselves. So because of students' disengagement or making the teachers feel disrespected. So how do we talk about that honestly without sliding into blame? And what does accountability look like at the school level?
I think you have to know what accountability looks like at the school level, first of all. You have to know what your administration is going to do or not do to support the things that are happening in your classroom space. And from there, it's how you can then go about creating the expectations and the consequences for broken expectations within your classroom. And I say that because, you have to, in order to have a good classroom and to try to get on the other side of like students being disrespectful, etc. It starts with extremely strong routines and procedures and teaching students those routines and procedures so that they build a habit for your classroom, and doing that from the beginning. You have to explicitly teach students, how you want them to act, or they're never going to act how you want them to act. So like you have to have that, and you have to set expectations for your classroom. I even recommend co-creating those with your students where you get more buy-in. And you have to have consequences for broken expectations. And depending on the level of support that you get from your administration depends on what those consequences of broken expectations may or may not look like. And this is where I go back to talking sort of about that idea of knowing what's within the locus of your control, because what you have control over is the community and the culture that you create within your own classroom space. And what you don't necessarily have control over is what happens outside of your classroom space. So I think the stronger you make that classroom space, the more you make your particular classroom space a place where kids want to go, the less you're going to deal with the disrespect and even the disengagement. I think the other part with the disengagement becomes what's happening in the classroom. Right? That's a place where teachers have to look inward to think about, like, how am I even teaching? So many classrooms that I go into, people are still doing the very traditional, I stand at the front of the room to give you explicit instruction, and then I give you worksheets to do or whatever. Like, kids just don't learn that way anymore. It's not the most effective method, and multiple studies out there would tell you that that's no longer the most effective method. And that's not to say that kids don't need explicit instruction. They do, but there are different ways to give that explicit instruction. And so if you're experiencing disengagement, you have to look inward and say, like, what am I doing to make this class engaging? Is my curriculum something that students are connected to, that they feel related to? Is it worldly and timely? Is it fun? Like, school doesn't have to be boring. So is it something that I would want to do? Because if I wouldn't want to do it, then certainly my students wouldn't want to do it. And there's times for worksheets, and there's times for all of the different things, right? But if you just are doing sort of like that traditional form of teaching day in and day out, then you are going to experience behavior problems and disengagement problems. And so I think that's a whole nother level of making sure that the things that you're teaching are engaging and relevant and connected to your students as well. I'm curious to see from your perspective, what are some of the things that you think about when you think about retention being tied to student behavior and accountability in schools?
Yeah, I think we can touch more on the accountability part, because that really, for me, is the crux of the matter. A lot of teachers get the blame for the way that the students are behaving in the classroom, for example, and it doesn't help when the response you get when you ask for help is either, firstly, oh, you are not skilled enough. I think you should go for professional development to be more skilled at handling difficult students. Or you know that the students are difficult. So what are you doing to engage the students? So this kind of deflection back to the responsibility being the teacher's responsibility is not something that is helpful, because the teacher is already at their wit end. What they're asking for is systematic support or systemic support that they do not have, because they don't have the authority to put in any systemic support. Whereas the school management or the school leaders have the authority, the power to create these systemic support structures that can actually help the teachers in disciplining the students in the classroom. So, for example, if a student misbehaves in the classroom, what are the systemic supports put in place to ensure that the lesson can continue? Is there like a time off corner for the students? Is there any restorative practices involved to help support the student? Is there any recourse for the teachers to call for support from administration or office staff to come in and take the student out so that the lesson can continue? So, and when that happens, it cannot be a punitive measure for both students and teacher. You punish the student for misbehaving, and then you punish the teacher for not being able to handle the situation. So then it becomes a lose-lose situation. So it has to be something that is systemic, that all teachers can tap on and rely on, that it will work and the students will get better and they will understand that their behavior is not acceptable in the classroom or even anywhere else for that matter, because the classroom is a microcosm of the environment that they'll be experiencing when they go out to work later on. So you can't behave that way at your workplace. You'll get sacked. This is the reason why we want to teach you how to behave in the classroom, to be social, right? To be sociable.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that is something that is that sometimes we miss out on because we want to look for the easy solutions. It's like a person who loses the key and they only search at the places where they see there's a spotlight. But when you ask them, where did you lose the key? I lost it in the dark corner in the room. But why are you looking for it in the light? Because it's easy. So you're not going to find the keys. You're not going to find the solutions where you're looking for. Because that's not where you lost it.
Yeah.
So it's just a kind of, I guess what teachers want is solutions which are not a result of, I would say, a reactionary, a reaction to what they're facing in the classroom, but rather a solution which is long lasting and effective and systemic. I think that's important.
I agree. And that's kind of also why I started by saying understand where your administration lies, because if you don't have the systemic support, you have to do something else. Like you have to think about, okay, so I don't have the systemic support, which means that there are a lot of things that are outside of my locus of control. So what am I going to do in my own classroom to try to maintain that control? And to me, that's where having extremely strong routines and procedures and systems and expectations and building good relationships with your students comes in extremely, it becomes extremely, extremely important when you don't have that support outside. I know that I have been in schools where I have had to create an environment in my classroom space that was somewhat different from what the larger school environment was, because there was a lack of systemic support in the larger school environment. But in my classroom, there was extreme support. There were extreme like sets of consequences, pathways, systems and routines, right? Like, but it took time to build that. I had to go into the school year knowing exactly what I wanted to happen so that I could build that up in my classroom to try to avoid. Now, does that mean I avoided all high level behaviors? No. Does that mean that there was times that kids got like kicked out of the room and just sent right back? Yes. But I also had to know that like that I knew that was going to be the case. Sometimes me kicking a student out was just enough for them to get out of the room, have to talk to somebody else, which forced them to walk down the hallway and walk back or whatever. And 9 times out of 10, by the time they came back, they were less angry than when they went out. Right? Like, but ultimately I was trying to handle everything that I could within my own classroom space because I was creating an environment where kids wanted to be. And did my students always want to come to school? No. But I had kids who would tell me they came to school to be in my class. And I think that's what has to be thought about. Like when you don't have the system in the school to support you, what are you going to do differently? And that's a challenge. It's a huge challenge. But that's where I say we have to not think about the things that we can't control, and we have to think about the things that we can control. And what we can control are the relationships we have with our students, the routines and the procedures that we put into our classroom, the expectations that we have for how students act within our classroom, the consistency to hold students to those expectations. And I think that's where a lot of things go awry, is when people have routines and expectations, but then do not hold to those things in a consistent way. And as soon as you are not consistent with what you expect from students, they're going to get unruly, and you're going to have a really hard time drawing it back. But there's good news, because there's always time to reset those things. And now I feel like we've gotten into an episode about like classroom management and instead of teacher retention, right?
Yeah, we need a separate episode for that.
Yeah, but to bring it back, I think that's people are teachers because they like education, they like teaching. So I think if teachers can shift that mindset of understanding that, like, yeah, I'm in a situation that I'm not getting the kind of support that I need from above, there are still measures that you can take to make your situation the best that you can make it. It's not an easy thing to do, but it's something that can be done.
Yeah.
Okay. So now we talked about the bad side. We talked about some solutions. We talked about some mindsets. So then what keeps teachers teaching? What are those pull factors that make somebody say, I can still do this for another year, even if they're only thinking about it as a year-to-year thing instead of like, I'm going to do this for 10 more years? What's leading to people still at the end of the day saying, I'm coming back for another year?
Okay, I guess this is where I try to role play and be like a principal of a school. So how would I retain my staff? I think from the perspective of a effective school leader, firstly, I think what I would do is I would protect planning time. Planning time is sacred. My teachers need to plan in order to deliver awesome lessons. So things that take away from this, stop it. Uh, for example, over long meetings that stretch too long, that can be done over email, stop it. Communication with parents, don't make it compulsory to communicate with parents at such frequent intervals. It's not necessary. You can just send out a newsletter once a month. I think that would be enough. Then protect their weekends. Make sure that they don't get burnt out because they have to do an exorbitant amount of work over the weekends and they lose their rest time. Yeah, so that will be under looking after the well-being of the teacher. Then secondly, I think what we say to the teachers matter a lot. I wouldn't always try to put blame on the teachers, for anything like bad results. Sometimes bad results happen because the teachers have done their best and the students have been pushed to their capacity and they still don't meet the results that you want. These things happen. It's part of life. Move on. So I wouldn't be saying like the teacher, what have you done to ensure that the results are there year in, year out, right? Instead, I think a more helpful question would be, how can I help? We did not produce the result this year. How can I help? What is lacking? What more support do you need that I can give and provide so that we can push on with the new cohort of students? So that kind of messaging, I think, is critical because it shows that the teachers that you really really want them to succeed, and that is the main motivator for teachers and any profession, I would say. Yeah. Another thing is to respond to requests for help immediately. I wouldn't wait too long before I gave the support that is needed. So there's a certain time factor. And I think when push comes to shove, I will have to think of things that I would stop. That means, are my teachers being overworked? Are they doing too much on some initiative, some program that has nothing to do with the academic side, where we are now fighting fire? Right? So if the concern is on the academics, then kill a program that doesn't have anything to do with it. Sometimes they can do one less program that does not really benefit the students but take away a lot of the time from the teachers to do. Yeah. So kill that. And then I guess I would also, and this is very important, make appreciation specific. I would appreciate my teachers because I've seen what could happen if I lose my teachers. They're very hard to replace, so they're very valuable. I
Mhm.
need them to feel that way, and I must make sure that this show of appreciation is frequent and they feel the authenticity behind it, because I think everybody wants to feel appreciated, especially if your results are not there yet, and then you have a leader that shows appreciation for what you are doing to try and get the results. That is definitely somebody that would win me over, and I would definitely try harder for this kind of leaders or leadership style. I think that is what will work with teachers who are like me. How about you?
I think one of the things that you touched on that I think is one of the biggest factors that lead to people saying I can do this for another year is the feeling of success. And that comes in a
Yeah.
lot of different ways, whether that's success that my class acted one way at the beginning of the year, but by the end of the year they acted differently. It could mean that they achieved some sort of like actual academic result. It could mean that you met school goals. It could mean that you felt like you grew professionally. I think success comes in a lot of different ways, and it's the feeling of success is one of the main factors that gets people by the end of the year to say, I want to do this again. I think it's the anytime that you get to the end of the year where you feel like it was an unsuccessful year, that's where it leads to bigger problems. I also think that teachers feeling like they had some level of support. That doesn't have to necessarily be that the school itself was the support, but people can say I can do this again because of the support of my colleagues. Because my colleagues and I get along really well and we can collaborate, and like that's the most helpful support that I've gotten throughout the year, and I want to stay here to continue to be with my colleagues. They could say that they like being with their students. And even though maybe systems are broken, maybe the students themselves bring them joy. And that's why people continue. It could be that they feel support from a single leader or coach in the building. And again, this can mean that while there are broken systems in the school, if they have a good connection with their direct coach or, dare I say, manager, in some cases, technically I am considered a manager, but my teachers don't see me as a manager. They actually call me coach because I do hold them accountable like a manager would, but that's not my main goal. Like my goal is to lead with empathy and understanding and accountability to help
Yep.
people grow, right? Like it doesn't always have to be like super hard. And so even though there's broken systems, if they have somebody that they know they can lean on that is going to support them, that is going to help to develop them, then that's the other thing that's going to keep people staying. I think also, like, if you're in a highly toxic school environment, that doesn't mean that moving to another profession is the right move. It might, like, you might be so burned out that you simply can't teach anymore. And I definitely understand that. I am not here to tell anybody that, like, you shouldn't move on. But teaching is a good profession, it's a rewarding profession. And people who became teachers in the first place, you did that for a reason. I'm not here to talk about what is your why. We all know what our why is. I know that when I decided to stay in education, I clung to my why. I clung to it because it was, I couldn't see myself doing anything else. I just needed to find how I could continue in education. So when I took the job that I have now, I asked a lot of questions because I wanted to make sure that I was putting myself into the right kind of school environment. And so I think that as you go into interviews, if you are changing schools or districts or states or countries, if you are moving around, be ready to be, when you go into interviewers, to ask the people interviewing you more questions than you should ask them more questions that they ask you. Take all of your experiences and turn them into the questions to make sure that you're getting into the environment that you want to get into. Because I have been in toxic environments and I
Yeah.
used that experience to interview for other jobs. And in some places I'd interview and we were not aligned in certain ways, whether that was about balance or even outlook as to what's the word I'm looking for. It's on the tip of my tongue. Anyways, I want to know that like people have purpose and direction for where a school year is going. And so I use all those questions to ask so that I know that I'm trying to put myself into the best position I can put myself into. Now that can backfire. Some people can,
Yeah.
some people talk a real good game and lie
Yeah.
about what their school environment is actually like. You definitely can get into some situations where you're like, this isn't anything like what the people told me, but then wrap all that and then know what you can control, work within your control, and just keep grinding. And if you're not getting the support that you need at a school, I would suggest that you look outside of your school for the support. Lean on the people within your school that you can lean on and find the support outside of your school to get what you need.
Yeah. So you mentioned an important thing about asking questions. So
Uh-huh.
that leads on to my question, which is about question, which is what questions should people ask themselves if they find that they are on the verge of or on the fence about leaving? What are important questions to ask?
I think I want to ask, I don't know if, all right, I don't, this is a hard question. I think it's,
But it's
in
an
some
important one.
cases,
Yeah.
it's reflection, right? What,
Yeah.
what support am I getting? Or what's the lack of support? And if there's a lack of support, what support do I need to be successful? I'd want to know, what has my administration done and looked like this year? Are they people who are only in their office, or are they people who you see around the building who come into classrooms? I'd want to ask myself if I feel like I'm being given the opportunity to have a balanced and sustainable work life, have a work life balance, if that's something that's important to the team that is overseeing me. I want to know if I have autonomy in the classroom to do what I need to do to reach the students, to engage the students, to teach the students. And ultimately, I think it comes down to levels of reflection too, on just like what were the positives and negatives over the course of a school year and what led to those negatives and positives. Was it mostly a me thing? Was it something that was due to other people, whether that was help or hurt? What's the environment like? Do I feel safe and secure? I think there's a lot of questions that you could ask to know where you stand when you get at the end of a year. And you're probably asking those questions with each experience that you have over the course of the year as well. But I think the experiences that you are having are the things that are going to lead to the questions that you have to know whether you're in the right place or the wrong place or the right profession or the wrong profession, etc. What are you thinking?
Yeah.
That was a hard
That,
question.
yeah. Yeah. Not so hard for me because I ask them all the time. Because for me, I always think about my personal growth. In fact, I think those who are close to me know that I change school every 5 to 6 years because I need the change of environment to refresh my mind, my mental strength, and to learn new things. That's just me because I like to learn new things. So I know I have to change and move around to see new things, and that refreshes me. So I have to always ask these questions. So among the questions that come across for me is, and these are important ones. The question that really keeps me in the profession is, do I still have moments where I remember why I became a teacher? If I can still think of those moments, they're still there, then this is where I still belong. And the questions that I ask to decide whether I still stay in the school for another year is, am I learning and growing, or am I just surviving? If I'm still learning and growing, that's very important for me, growth, then I would stay. But if I feel that there's nothing else for me to learn, I need a new place to keep growing, then that's a sign that I need to go. Um, so those are the two important questions that I ask myself.
Like that you
And I
brought
think it's
up,
also,
I like
yeah,
that you brought up the idea of change every five
yeah,
to 6 years. I had a mentor once tell me that change every 5 to 7 years was important, and that it didn't necessarily mean change that you needed to like leave the school that you're in, but some
mm,
level of change needed to happen in life to kind of like keep you going. And so at the school level, it might mean leaving one school and going to another. It might mean moving from teaching one grade to teaching a different grade, or it might mean
yeah,
taking on a leadership role in conjunction with your classes, or it might mean
yeah,
that you're starting to teach an honors or an AP or an IB class where you've only traditionally taught regular class. It might mean changing subjects. You know, like it might mean mentoring another teacher. It might mean moving out of a teacher role and into some other role within a school. Like there's a lot of different
yeah,
changes that can happen in education that don't necessarily mean leaving your school and going to another school, right? But the
yeah,
idea of every 5 to 7 years needing to have some level of change within the profession, I think you nailed that.
yeah. That's important. Yeah, like
I'll,
if I left, yeah, what would I do?
mm-hmm.
And I haven't figured that out yet.
The
So I
grass
guess
the grass
I
is not
wanna
always
keep.
greener on the other side. I've known a lot of people who have left a school and gone
Mm,
into a situation that was worse. And then
yep.
thinking back that, oh, that situation that I was in actually wasn't that bad.
Yeah. Yep. And there's a funny situation. I remember one of my colleagues left the school because he couldn't stand the school leadership. And then 2 years later, the school leader left and ended up in the school that he went to.
That's funny. I think the other thing you touched on there that I think is important as you ask those questions is like what is that support that I'm getting? Because the professional development, and this is just like a whole nother topic that we could have a whole episode on, is really
Yeah.
around what professional development looks like. Like you named it, like we don't need long meetings. And
Mm,
are people getting differentiated development? Because
mm,
leaders want teachers to differentiate for students, but the
yep.
reality is we're all just people. We're all just human beings. And we all learn differently and we all have different needs. So every
Yep.
time you take an entire group of teachers and slap them into one professional development setting, with the assumption that all 30 people, 40 people, 50 people, however many teachers are there, all need that same thing is crazy.
Yeah.
And there's still so many schools out there where teachers don't have independent coaches within their school setting to be able to help them develop with where they are without trying to lump everybody into one bucket. And so I think really knowing what kind of support you're getting and are you getting the kind of individualized support that you need the same way that you're trying to give individualized support to your students, that's something that's going to lead a teacher to say like I'm growing and developing or I'm not. And if that's the one piece that's missing, there are people out there who can help you. You don't have to have somebody coach you on instructional techniques and strategies who's inside of your school. Somebody who's outside of your school actually may be able to give you an even better outlook. So if you're not getting that individual support and that's leading you to want to leave the profession, seek that individual support because it can change a lot of things and it can help you identify what's within and what's outside of your locus of control as well to help you figure out like what I can do differently in the classroom to find more success.
Yeah. Fully agree.
So we went in a lot of different directions today and talked about a
Yeah,
lot of
man.
different things, man. So what would you say is your biggest takeaway for teachers and leaders who want to help improve retention? What might be one mindset shift or one action or a couple that people can stay if they want to stay retained in teaching? Wrap us up.
Think I think it's important to stop treating teacher retention as a problem to solve, but start looking at it as more of a symptom to understand. So when teachers leave, they are not the problem. They are like the canary in the coal mine telling you that something about the system is broken. So the question isn't how do we convince them to stay? It should be what are we doing that makes leaving feel like the only option they have. And this shift in mindset, as you mentioned, changes everything because it moves you from a defensive to a curious mindset, and
Mhm.
from trying to put band-aids to finding root causes, and managing teachers, from trying to manage teachers, right, to actually serving them so that they can serve the students better. And I think that's a very important step to take to solve this global crisis, of teachers leaving the profession, which is a sad thing.
Shocking. We need to discover the root causes
Yeah.
so we can fix the systems.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, this was a really interesting conversation. I think that it's been a conversation that's been a long time coming, and probably one that we'll have to revisit and come back to at some point in time.
Hey, man, we covered so many topics that could be an entire podcast topic on their own.
Yeah. And that actually makes me think too, like to all of our listeners, what did we miss? What can we talk about more? Do you got some other ideas? What are we not seeing? Because we are just two people looking through our own lenses and our own perspectives, and trying to talk about this through what our experiences have been and the people that we know. But if we're missing out on something, I want to know more. The goal here is obviously we want people to be teachers. We want you to stay as educators. And Ghazali and I are here to support that. And so we're always looking to understand where people are. So to all those listeners, please drop us a line, come and join us, and let's have another conversation about this from another perspective. Leave comments with the podcast. You leave questions. Check in with us on social media. Let's talk more about the problems that you're facing, and so we can help find some solutions and talk more about those solutions on the podcast.
Dustin, one other thing, it just came to me because since we are teachers and teachers love to give homework, there's one thing that I want you guys to Google and do a bit of research on. If you're thinking of leaving the profession, okay, it may just be the solution for you that you might be looking for. Google and do a research on this term called job crafting. Okay, job crafting, and that's your homework for this week. Okay, that it may just lead to the solutions to the problems that you're facing. Yeah.
Job crafting. Okay. Thank you. So, thanks to everybody for listening to this episode. This is a complex topic, but we appreciate everybody for being here to have this conversation with us. And as always, if you are enjoying Teachers Talking, please subscribe, leave a review, share it with your fellow educators. New episodes drop every other Monday. And we would love for you to be a guest on Teachers Talking. Just fill out the 2-minute interest form in the show notes. You don't need to be an expert about anything, just passionate about education. We just want to hear your stories, your strategies. We love talking to teachers. So please join us for a conversation sometime. Otherwise, Ghazali, we'll talk to you next time. Yes, we will talk to you next time. Keep on teaching. Bye, everybody. It